How's it going, everybody? The Cellar Joke is back, and I was struggling with figuring out what idea I wanted to have for this video. And then, just like the Crudes,
I have an idea!
And then I just neutron brain blasted all over my room. I thought of, you know what? I love Spindrift. It is my favorite gadget in the game. Let's talk about Spindrift in a gadget gabble. But not just any gadget gabble. Let's take this a step further and make a gadget upgrade gabble. What do I mean by this? It's a terrible name, I know. You can complain and call it dog crap, whatever. But Spindrift is a gadget that I personally use a lot. I used it to get the Legend 3, I used it to get the Legend 2, and I used it to get the Legend 1. Drift Spinner kit just released. And I think talking about how we could upgrade Spindrift as a collective community would be a cool idea. Now, I'm going to have some stipulations here. First, this is going to be taking place in a theoretical next patch, or patch 1.4, 1.5, whatever. So we're going to take part in this in a hypothetical realm where Sega is doing gadget buffs and nerfs. Secondly, I'm going to be taking this idea and speaking on the fact of Double Ring Engine was actually nerfed, and we have a situation where the devs actually are able to buff a lot of the other gadgets because they are nerfing some of these other more powerful gadgets.
The third and final stipulation I'd like to add is that in this hypothetical realm, desync itself has been fixed heavily. You're only going to experience desync issues maybe like once every 20 games or something. It's very infrequent and it's not that big of a deal, right? And this is something I want to stress because one of the ideas I have for Spindrift actually relies on the fact that desync is actually fixed. So these are the three stipulations that I want to go into this video going about, and I want to get started on this right away, and let's talk about just a universal buff to Spindrift itself and all potential Spindrift gadgets that I will be talking about today, and that is that you are allowed to finally counterspin with Spindrift. So being able to counterspin with Spindrift actually matters a lot. Counterspinning would allow you to Spindrift more and cause more disruptions to players, while also allowing you to get more value out of Spindrift more often, and it can come at a price, so that way you don't just get maximum value always from counterspinning. So maybe we could have it to where when you counterspin, you have to restart your whole spin, or it takes longer for your spin to start back up, or it could even be something as simple as like you lose like 5 flat speed for like half a second to counterspin, so that way your car has a chance to. It could be any number of things that allow you to actually counterspin, and I think this would be a great change, and I think in a desync-free realm with Spindrift, you're going to see Spindrift actually do more knockback and cause more issues itself. Let's just say that Spindrift in this desync-free realm is knocking people back about the same on average as it is currently with desync in the game. So that's probably the only universal change I would like to make. I don't think making Spindrift a 1 slot is a smart decision, but I don't think that it's a bad one either. But I think keeping it at 2 slots and keeping the identity of Spindrift being a 2 slot gadget at least is the best option. Now, going into the 3 Spindrift gadgets I would like to talk about, and if it wasn't for my friend ParTwo that actually helps me come up with some of these ideas or make them a little bit more refined, I probably would have released a video that is significantly worse than this one is going to be. So, after talking with ParTwo and getting their opinions on my 3 ideas, I would like to start off with Heavy Spindrift. Heavy Spindrift is going to be a Spindrift gadget that is based on specifically your power stat. It is going to be very fun. It knocks back people significantly farther away and can knock them off lines, it can knock them off tracks easier, things of that nature. And this sounds really broken for a lot of reasons. It sounds like it's going to be so broken, just run it with Hyper Ring Engine and have infinite power, and this is where a couple stipulations come into play. So, Heavy Spindrift is only going to be based on your flat power stat that you can see in the vehicle character customization screen, or the stat screen I should say. And this is very particular because when it comes to Heavy Spindrift, if we were able to get say a 100 power combo and then tack on Hyper Ring Engine and get another 100 power, you would have 200 power, which could absolutely wreck the whole gadget and make it so strong that it's very unfun to play against. So we want to make it to where it can only cap out at 100 flat, so that way players can't just go 300, 400 power or whatever and find some way to do that. This makes it to where your builds are going to be a little more close to each other in terms of your power stats. So like speed vehicles and excel vehicles, which have naturally higher power, will not get nearly as knocked back as say handling and boost vehicles, which have much lower power. This makes it to where you could actually not only use whatever vehicle you like, but it incentivizes using power vehicles and having the negative drift speed penalty, which means that you are putting yourself in a negative scenario to where your Spindrift is going to be not only slower, and it's going to be harder to hit people because you're going to be going slower. This makes a very fun drawback to the kit, because if you say you want to use a power character and excel vehicle, you are now committing to the worst vehicle in the game to make the spin drift work, or you have to commit to a worse vehicle that makes you slower when you're using it. I think not only that, I think another idea with this gadget is the fact that when you counter back, or when you're starting to spin up initially, it takes longer. So let's say spin drift takes up until you get a level 1 charge. Heavy spin drift might take up until you get a level 2 charge almost, to where it's at maximum potential where you can knock people back super far. And when you counter back, you have to wait till you get about like a level 2 when you counter back. So that way, every time you counter back, instead of it being like, say, you have to wait till a level 1.5 or a level 2, now you have to wait till like a 2.25 or something, or 2.5. It's hard to find this balance, obviously, but it could allow players to have this very fun gadget that takes a while to spin up and get maximum charge, but it can also allow you to send people much farther and cause much more disruptions, and it incentivizes you to use many different vehicle combos and character combos that you otherwise wouldn't. I think this would be a very fun gadget to the game. I think for the fact that it has so many drawbacks, it would be a 2-slot. If it didn't have so many drawbacks, you can reasonably put it at a 3-slot and maybe make it to where if you wanted this to be a 3-slot gadget, it'd be take away the fact that it takes up until a level 2 charge, maybe it only takes up to a 1.5 charge of drift to get it to max potential. When you counter back, you have to wait till about 1.75 or a level 2. And overall, if you're spinning, if you have higher power than your opponent, maybe with heavy spin drift, you actually can send your opponent away if you're trying to spin drift to counteract it, because when two spin drifters actually run into each other, if I remember correctly, neither of them gets sent. But with heavy spin drift, if you have more power, you can actually send another spin drifting player away. It could still incentivize combos with very high flat power and natural power, so that way you can have a lot of fun and you can beat out other combos. Going into my second spin drift idea that could be for a new version of spin drift, I'd like to talk about a spin drift called Cyclone spin drift, and this has two different variants to it. This has the 2-slot route or a 3-slot route, and I'm going to start with the 2-slot route. So Cyclone spin drift and 2 slots would allow you to reflect items when you're spin drifting. It takes about the same amount of time as heavy spin drift to charge up, if not very slightly less, and when you counter back, it takes longer to counter back up. So if we say that heavy spin drift takes 1.5 drift bars to charge up, we could say that this takes about 2 to get fully spun back up, and it takes about 1.25 to 1.5 bars. So that way, there's actually a way where you can punish someone trying to counter your item. So like, if you see them starting their spin charge up, and they don't have the blue and orange particles that you would normally see when they're at max spin, you can hit them right away, and then they'll get hit and slow down tremendously, right? And this version of Cyclone Drift for 2 slots would allow you to reflect very specific items. These items being red and green gloves, level 1 and 2 bomb, and spike balls. Why specifically these items, you may ask? And the reason I chose these items specifically is because some of these are the most common items, but also it makes it to where you have some things that you can counter that makes it a little bit easier to have fun. It makes it a little bit easier to deal with some of the item play in the game currently, but it also makes it to where you have an opportunity to get hit still by some of these items. If someone throws them like point blank and they're unreactable, you can't just instantly spin up and block them. I chose these also because when it comes to some of these other items such as Slicer, Slime, Magnet, they have ways that you can't really avoid with spin drift, because Slicer latches onto your car just like Magnet would. Magnet now latches onto your car through magnetism, so you can't really spin that away. Slicer would latch onto your car by puncturing a hole into the side and slicing through, and then Slime would basically drop on the top of your car. It's the same reason why weights wouldn't be spun back from this. Now, if they would decide to go with the 3-slot variant, I would actually think it takes a little bit longer than heavy spin drift to charge fully up, and it takes a little bit longer when countering back as well. But if you tried to counter back more than once with Cyclone Drift 3-slot, what would end up happening is that Cyclone Drift actually would just not activate anymore, and you would have to restart your drift entirely to get it to activate. Not only that, this would allow you to reflect magnets, slimes, and slices as well, and it would give you a way to block more items, but it takes significantly longer to get in that defense, so it's not on demand, and you can't counter back more than once, which means that you can't just keep countering back and forth, getting more spins off back to back, making it to where it'd be nearly impossible to utilize this like something like Ult Charge was back in patch 1.2.1 and back when the game first dropped. I think this gives Cyclone Drift a very fun niche that allows it to potentially be a viable gadget, even if we had the 2-slot variant where it only blocks like gloves, spike balls, and level 1 and 2 bombs. And to continue with this, now you might be wondering, okay, so how is it going to reflect items? Is it going to reflect items randomly, or is it going to be based on where you're you're facing, how's this going to work? I think the way this should work is if you try to counter back during the time you're about to get hit, you get hit still. But if you are facing a certain direction or you're driving in a specific direction, so like let's say when you're drifting to the left, you're at maximum Cyclone spin drift spinning, and you are angled maybe like you're going 35 degrees to the left. The item that's in front of you will get shot 35 degrees to the left of where you're facing. So you can't just automatically like target someone by redrifting and for a split second aiming directly in front of you, targeting someone dead on. You basically reflect it in a specific direction to where you're facing. So that way, the item just can't be reflected randomly in a direction either behind you or in front of you. And now you could make it do that, but I feel like that would lead to more RNG factors that would be really problematic for the game. And I think players already have a lot of issues with RNG factors, so I think we shouldn't allow this to occur. So I think making it to where it actually goes in a specific direction is better, and this would also hold true with Cyclone spin drift. It would go in the same direction that you're angled in or you're driving towards, so that way you don't have this potential of flinging a magnet backwards and then landing on someone all the way back in like 8th place or something, which could lead to a lot of problems. Finally, the last spin drift I would like to talk about is anti-spin drift, which sounds a little weird on paper and it's a very awkward name to talk about, but there's actually a specific reason why I call it anti-spin drift, and that is because what it does is that for both the 2 and 3 slot variant of this hypothetical gadget, you will be taking away a player's drift charge level, or you'll be taking a chunk of their drift away from them. And this is a very problematic gadget that required the stipulation of desync was getting fixed, and desync has been fixed tremendously, because this could lead to a lot of player frustration if it's not properly balanced and doesn't have proper drawbacks to this gadget. So let's talk about the 2 slot variant of anti-spin drift. Anti-spin drift at 2 slots would be a gadget that takes 50% of a player's current drift level charge, which means if you're trying to go to a level 3 charge and you're currently at a level 2 charge and you're like say 50% of the way to a level 3, if you get hit by someone using anti-spin drift, you would lose that 50% charge towards a level 3, and it would only work once per spin per player. So even if you were able to say hit that same player 3, 4, 5 times, whatever, you would only take the first initial hit drift charge away from them, and depending on if you were at the max spin state or the minimum spin state, it takes a certain amount of drift away. So let's say you just started your spin drift up and you hit someone, you'd only take maybe like 5% of their drift away for that level. But if you hit them during the maximum spin and then you're about to hit a level 3 and you hit them right before it, you take about 50% of their drift charge away. So instead of getting that level 3, they go back down to 2.25 drift charge roughly. I think this would be a really fun gadget, but it does need to have some very specific weaknesses that makes it to where players using this don't just automatically cause mass chaos, and it makes it more fun to play against because players understand that there is a drawback to this. I think there are a couple drawbacks that would be really fun. I think the first one being that you can only knock players away at a small distance. So this means that on optimal lines, you're not spinning players away very far, so they can still take optimal lines and barely get shoved, but they lose some of their drift charge, which I think is a really good drawback because even if they take some of your drift away, you're not getting forced off of an optimal line, and you're not going to get desync shoved super heavily off of a line, which also means that you're not going to get flung off the track more often, so that makes it easier to play against people using spin drift. Not only that, I think for this 2 slot variant, having a friction drift like debuff, where you are like say 5 flat speed slower while you're spinning, would be a good negative because that means you have to fully commit to the spin drift to actually hit someone to get any value, and if you don't, you're going to lose value. And on top of that, I think with some of that drift charge that you take from the player, maybe you get like 10% of that drift charge added to your meter. So let's say you take 50% of someone's meter, you get 10% of that meter towards your next drift level. I think this would be a really fun gadget for a 2 slot. I think it has good weaknesses, and you're very susceptible to getting hit. You can't move people off their lines that easily, so it makes it to where it's a lot harder to actually screw people up. But it would allow you to deal with some of these people that are snaking a ton, making it harder for them to take lines as optimally as possible. But you have good negative effects where you can definitely get punished for missing spin drift hits. I think it's great overall. Now, I do think there is some discussion where we could maybe say like this is too strong or this is too annoying, and I would like to hear your guys' comments down below on this. But I would like to talk about the 3 slot variant. The 3 slot variant is going to be a lot stronger. It is going to take up to 50% of a player's total drift charge. So if you're at a level 3 and you get hit by someone using 3 slot anti-spin drift, you're going to go back down to a 1.5 drift charge. And I know this sounds broken, but there are 3 major drawbacks that I would like to talk about. First, remember that friction drift drawback? That's going to be even worse here. Instead of losing 5 flat speed, you're going to be losing 10 flat speed during every spin drift. So you were committing to being significantly slower during it. So that way you cannot just go right behind someone and then start the spin drift up because you're going to slow down too much to actually hit them. It has to be a premeditated action, so that way you can't just automatically kill their drifting. Secondly, you will have a drift charge penalty added to this spin drift. It will take you 20% longer to charge all drift levels. Now, this is because since you're taking 50% of a player's current drift charge level, and some of it's being given back to you after you hit them, this makes it to where you have to commit to this and you have to hit someone. Otherwise, you are having two massive negative effects that would really hinder you. And if you do hit a player, the negative effects that you have will still stay to some degree, but they'll be a lot weaker. So instead of losing 10 flat speed, maybe you only lose like 3 flat speed during the time you're spinning because you hit someone. And then let's say once you hit someone for the first time with this, you can't hit anyone else with this, or you can hit someone else, but it'll be a weaker effect. So instead of taking up to 50%, it can only take up to maybe like 15%. So that way you can't just constantly hit like 8 people and then get a level 3 instantly. Makes it to where you still have to charge your drift and you get a minimal return of investment on this gadget. So there is fun play here. And on top of that, because you're charging your drift slower, maybe after you get the first initial hit, maybe your drift charge is only 10% slower. So that way you don't get super heavily hindered. I think it could lead to some very fun play. It is definitely a very hypothetical gadget that could be a little too strong if it was like a 2 slot, but I think it could be a very fun 3 slot that a lot of players could find a lot of fun with. Again, this is more of a offline good gadget, but I think it would lead to some very fun stuff that has a good innate weakness that other gadgets don't really have. And I think the biggest thing is making sure that there are drawbacks to these gadgets to make sure that everyone can have fun and there actually is viable counterplay to these gadgets, because I don't think it's fair to say that Cyclone Drift shouldn't have an immediate startup and then block every item. I think that's unfair. I don't think anti-spin drift should automatically take 50% of your drift charge. I think that's very unfair, because it's like, why should you get rewarded for just popping the button? You should have to really plan out your spin drift lines, and you should be planning out when and where you're going to try to spin drift someone. Especially with heavy spin drift, like, you shouldn't just be rewarded by clicking the button and then someone goes 55 miles into the stratosphere. That should not happen. This is more of a hypothetical video on how I would buff spin drift and 3 new spin drift gadgets that I would add to the game and how I would balance them. I think this is a very fun discussion video, and I would like to hear what your guys' thoughts are on these spin drift changes. Do you think these are actually really good changes? Do you think these are very enjoyable? Not only that, you would actually be able to stack these spin drifts. So you could stack, like, say, heavy spin drift on top of Cyclone spin drift, so you can have 2 spin drift 2 slots. So you would have this super slow charge spin, but you can knock back people super far, and you can reflect some of the other attack items, so like gloves, red gloves, level 1 and 2 bomb, and spike ball. So you can have some really fun gameplay. And then you can put, like, say, like level 2 and 3 quick charge on your plate, so that way you can have some faster drift charging, but you can't put any speed-based gadgets on, so there is a massive drawback when you build your plates. I think there's a lot of fun to be had with this. I think there's a lot of fun discussion. I would really like to know what you guys think in the comments down below. Have yourselves a great one. Thank you so much for watching, and if you liked the video, please press the like button and let me know what other gadget you would like me to come up with some ideas with. I'll catch you guys in the next video.